he was looking for the right way to offer this course. And he had looked at a bunch of technologies, and none of them were exactly a good fit. So there are quite a few solutions out there that are good for what they call mastery learning. They deliver lectures, videos, multiple choice questions, programming assignments to the student until the student masters a particular
so that's
topic.
the concept. So I've done some where the camera's trained on you, and you're just talking.
Right.
And
it's just
so
a one-way direct.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's a one-way channel of, you have the professor, you say, the professor knows the answers to all the, sort of questions you have, and we just, help you gain that knowledge.
So it's sort of sage in a little box.
Sage on the stage, yeah. So, but, entrepreneurship is not taught that way, right? There is no multiple choice question that would test whether you're an entrepreneur, or at least we haven't found it yet.
None that we know of.
Not that. So we thought, is there any way to do this online? And I asked him how he does that in his Stanford course. So he teaches this entrepreneurship course in Stanford, which is pretty popular. To an audience of probably less than 100, around 100 students every year. And he told me, well, there I get the students to come, form a team. Each team works on their own project. They come give a presentation. They get feedback from their peers. They get feedback from mentors that I find for them, and that's the way the course works. And then I thought, well, maybe we should do that online. So I initially suggested that I commit a little bit time.
A little bit of time.
Yeah, a little.
This was the beginning.
This was the beginning. Yeah, exactly.
That's in the water.
Yeah, I put the total. So actually, I and my student committed 8 days, 4 weekends to him, and said, we will put something together for you to simulate this. But what happened was that...
But just a little time out. So even this, you're doing programming. Like you're sort of switching to... Right.
So actually, I haven't had...
like a normal... Did you ever have any background in programming or like...
Well, my degree is computer science, and I used to code a long time ago. So I had to actually, sort of, learn a few things. Okay. But I thought it's a fun project, and I'm helping a very good colleague of ours. And very good, and his, heart was in the right place. He really, was trying to teach as many people as possible. So I thought I'll help him out, and hopefully in the process I learned something.
Right.
So, we put this thing together, and then 80,000 people signed up for this course. So this were, sort of, one of those, sort of interesting, people like sort of, there were people from serial entrepreneurs, very experienced entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, all the way to, kids in Accra, Ghana, who didn't have internet access at home or at school. They would have to walk to an internet cafe. They sent us pictures from this internet cafe in Ghana, where they would, sort of go there and, watch the lectures or submit their assignments. Very diverse group of people. We had the students from over 150 different countries in the world. In terms of, sort of distribution of, gender, it was actually almost an equal split between, male and female. Very interesting people, very energetic, very enthusiastic, who really, sort of wanted to do something.
So one question. I've interviewed Amin and Chuck for our book on scaling, and one of the things I thought that was really interesting, we emphasize this in the book, is so you got 80,000, whittled down some. You have these people all over the world. So what do you do to make it so that they feel accountable and obligated? Because if you think about it, these are people you never met. So what do you do to build in accountability and evaluation in such a huge course?
Right.
I thought that was, and then let's go to a demo, because I think it's almost. Okay. I think we should show folks how it works.
All right, sure. So the very first step of this was that we put them into a small teams. So you have accountability to an immediate set of peers. I actually, sort of wrote the first, clustering algorithm. We looked at the backgrounds of, what country they're from, what language they speak, what's their interest, whether they want to start a nonprofit, for-profit. and we try to put them into teams. So there is this research on what's the composition of effective startup teams. It's better if they are close to each other, but they have a diverse background. Like you match a business person to a science person to a technology person.
6 engineers or 6 dev people or something.
Definitely not. Yeah. So we put them into teams and then said, submit your assignments, work together, submit individually or work together, submit together. But every time a team of students submitted something, they were rating each other. From Bob was a no-show to he was fantastic. He was a leader. So you would accumulate this ratings from your peers.
So would you get like variation in how people rated each other?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So this was not like one of those things where everybody is above average. You actually got
no, we got actually a very good, and actually it's not like a normal distribution.
So what's it look like?
We actually get very fat tails in the sense that it's closer, it's something between normal and uniform.
Okay.
So you collect these ratings, and then the ratings would turn into a reputation score.
And this is all your public rating among the 80,000 students in the class.
Yes,
so everybody else's rating.
Yes. So from the very beginning, and you talk about this in your book. Actually, I learned some of these later. Creating this culture of accountability and transparency is very important if you want to scale up the experience of a classroom that's of size 20 to a classroom that's of size 20,000.
So the brilliance of it, which Huggy Rao and I really liked, is they created a world where basically they, as the teachers, did not have to monitor everybody. It was a self-monitoring system, and so I thought that was brilliant. So it's sort of like giving the work to the customers in some ways, but it makes it better for the customer, and it reduces there's no way you could have a big enough brain to keep track of 80,000 people.
Right.
So I thought that was actually brilliant. Well, let's go to a demo. So we've been talking about it. So real quickly, when did your company, when did you sort of move from this class to a company? And then let's show them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so if I fast forward, so the first course started, it was actually very successful. The students formed teams. They worked on a whole bunch of different projects. Some of these projects turned into companies. So at the end of the course, we helped them pitch to venture capitalists, the top 20 teams. There was this team from Bolivia. They couldn't even, sort of speak English very well. We managed to find a venture capitalist who could speak Spanish. They pitched in Spanish. Some of these companies got funding. And then, we got a lot of requests. So we got a lot more students, and then we got a lot more of my colleagues who wanted to offer courses. And at the time, since we wanted to do this somewhat independent from Stanford, so we get courses from Stanford and other universities. We started it as a separate startup. So from somebody who writes papers, as you said, I turned into somebody who thinks about entrepreneurship education and very quickly becoming an entrepreneur myself.
And now you're on leave as CEO. And by the way, just so I mean, wanted to prepare the demo, but just a comment about the Stanford Engineering School. So for some universities, it might be sort of weird for a professor to stop out to be an executive, but this is in the great Stanford engineering tradition. And just to give you an example, our CEO, our president, John Hennessy, who was a guest in your class actually, John has stopped out to be a senior executive in startups several times, and is in fact the lead board member on Google. So for better or for worse, the Stanford Engineering School is a very entrepreneurial class, and what Amin is doing is actually not that unusual for our faculty, and is viewed as something that we sort of all win. So we want him to get his company started and then to come back and be a faculty member. That's the goal. Okay, so let's go to demo.
Sure. All right, let's see. I got to sort this out. So everyone can see my screen? All right, so actually the project started as a Stanford Venture Lab project, but since the range of courses that we are offering right now is broader than entrepreneurship, we call it NovoEd. So it's on novoed.com/courses/entrepreneurship. You can see the entrepreneurship courses. And, it's like, range of courses on from, how you start the startup, how to lead it, how to become how to pitch to a venture capitalist how to finance it. But let me go to this Stanford course, Technology Entrepreneurship, Part 1 by Chalk, and show you how it works. So it's, as we mentioned, it's a free course. Anybody can take it. So this version of the course is started on September 16, 2 days ago, and you can still sign up. If you go to class, so it's as soon as you log in, the welcome, and then you can see the students who were active today, the lecture that's posted, the announcements, the trending threads on the site. Now, let me do, since this course started only 2 days ago, there isn't much content. Let me go to a version of the course that was offered a little bit earlier and show you one of the teams that was formed. So this is the environment that we give to a team of entrepreneurs. So this team is called Empowered E-Patients. So they have a nice logo, raise hell and change the world. Every team, they can create their business model canvas, so they can fill out, articulate what their business model is. They have a journal, so when they, they have a workspace, so they can collaborate together, submit their assignments, write, different, write down their ideas in the journal.
I like their logo.
Yeah.
Raise hell and change the world.
So let's look at one student profile. So since we are talking about accountability and transparency and how that can be used for scaling up, this student Andrea Downing, she is in Washington D.C. in the United States. I know it since 1 year ago. Last activity about 24 hours ago. She has a team rank of 5 out of 5. So she's a very good student. Yeah. Start with the bio. The goal is to empower patients to take control of their health. Course profile details, her interests. You can see all the submissions of the students. So whatever they have submitted, whether it's a business model, whether it's a review of someone else's business model, whether it's presentation on that they were going to submit to a venture capitalist. So actually at the very end, you can see the students' community activities. So this student has initiated 7 threads, posted 44 replies, received 52 votes, has written 4 peer reviews. So it's actually a pretty active and engaged student.
And so one thing I like about this, you can see when you look at the site, first of all, it's very social. There's forums, there's all sorts of things to do. And then the other thing is, and you didn't talk about this other part, but it's worth talking about, that people would kind of get kicked off of teams, or they'd be pressured to leave teams when they weren't performing.
Right.
So the numbers went down. Still, many thousand people take it, but one thing I like about this is in many ways it's more accountability than in class, where I have to watch 60 or 70 students. In this case, they're all sort of keeping track of one another. So it's really been a pleasant surprise to me, and also you see how sort of lovely it is too. I think that it's quite an aesthetically nice site. So do you want to do any more in the demo, or do you want to sort of talk about where your company's going? What do you want to do next?
So let me see. Actually, probably I shouldn't do too much of the demo because, you can actually go, anybody can go check it out yourself. So I want to spend too much time on the site, as much as I like it and as much as I spent a lot of time. But I probably shouldn't. So here, since you mentioned, this is the at the close to the. So one of the things that we do is that we interview various leaders in the field on behalf of the students. So students submit questions, vote up the best questions, and then I or someone else go and ask the question. So we interviewed John Hennessy, and you can see this on the
our university president.
Yes, university president, and we got a whole range of questions. Some of them were about online learning, and that's not surprising. And there were quite a few questions about tech transfer and how Stanford has been successful in tech transfer, and a lot of startups started from Stanford and have been successful. And at the same time, the Silicon Valley environment. And I can understand that there is a lot of demand for it, and our goal is to create a virtual environment like the Silicon Valley using our entrepreneurship courses. So in a sense, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the trends, the first step is to open up access, and this is something that the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Certificate Program is also doing. Right, at a low cost, students all around the world can take a course and learn about entrepreneurship. But then the next step is to empower them, to help them have access to each other, help them if they like, sort of to form teams, to work on their own ideas, to give each other feedback, and to provide them with resources like mentorship and others so that they can
that's
take the
another
next
thing about
step.
the platform is that you recruited these mentors who would then sign up and mentor teams all around the world too. That was another sort of social aspect. I just couldn't believe that. That was
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we sent messages out. So some of the mentors were found by the students, but probably 50% of the mentors we found themselves. We just sent messages to people, and these were very busy venture capital. Like, we had partners in Sequoia sign up as mentors on the program, and they were extremely generous with their time and extremely helpful. So we had, mentors who started by saying, I'm going to mentor one team, and ended up mentoring 10.
Oh, yeah, I talked to one of those. Our buddy Barry Clavon lost control.
Right.
One of the people who's involved in various courses around her, he ended up mentoring about 6 of them.
Right. So I guess the lesson is we just have to create the right environment and help people find each other. That's all what we are doing. And then, they learn from each other, they help each other, they actually, start their own venture.
So maybe what you could do, I want to make sure, since our focus is on entrepreneurship and innovation for this certificate in particular, but I want to make sure to just give people a sense. So this was the very first one, and we'll talk to them about how you started your company, moving from just sort of you and Fernaz and Chuck, and you sort of have this company now. But give us a sense of how many different places and classes that NovoEd is being used, just to give people a sense of how much because it's only been about a year, hasn't it?
It's actually less than a year. So I started in January full time, and then we launched the platform, the learning environment, officially in mid-April.
Okay.
So it's been, it's not very long. Yeah. But fortunately, we have, I think right now, around 15 to 20 courses in entrepreneurship. We have around 500,000 students who are interested in entrepreneurship alone from all around the world. So we have actually a very big contingency from Latin America. The biggest is still United States. Within United States, the biggest is still California, but we are growing and making it more global. Yes. And the goal is to develop this to 30 to 40 courses in entrepreneurship by the end of next year. So hopefully that would be a combination of free courses, certificate courses, and then hopefully a master's program.
I'm using your platform for an online version, which I'm sorry isn't free, and my in-class. The other way that I use the platform is my students form teams. We grade them actually. So in my class, I've got 60 in-class students, and I'll give feedback to each student, and all 60 students can see my feedback. In the old days, your professor would just write on your paper, and it would be this private thing. And I also have to be careful because there were times when I said things like early on, I had to kind of control myself. We don't actually show the grades because we think that's a privacy issue. But in terms of the feedback, that way when people say what's a good or a bad paper, instead of saying, oh, we've got to collect them, it's go to the site and look at the kind of feedback that we're giving people. So for us, it's actually very convenient. And I did have the experience using your site of actually sitting on an airplane, Virgin Airlines, like Flight 10C or something, and grading all my students' papers on the way, their final exams on the way to Boston. The flight started, I got online, and it was over. I'd actually graded all their papers, and that's where Amin's platform was fabulous. And everybody, and I had the students complaining about the feedback I gave them online in the airplane. It was sort of like amazing. It was like a live interaction thing. One other question before we sort of move to the process of how the startup is unfolded and how you're getting there. So is this just a Stanford event, a Stanford platform, or are you moving out to other universities? What's going on with that?
We are actually now offering courses from a wide, sort of a lot of universities. It's actually growing. Yeah. So, for example, one in entrepreneurship, Babson College is offering.
Yeah.
When in for training venture capitalists, the Kaufman Fellow Academy is actually offering a few courses on, how to become a better VC, and also a few courses for entrepreneurs, how to pitch better or how to raise money for your startup. There is, so some of these are, we're going to announce soon, but let me at least do one of them pre-announcement. The Carnegie, yeah. So the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching is now working together to develop a whole set of courses. And so Carnegie Foundation has been looking at online education and coming up with better methods for engaging students for over 5 years. So now we are trying to use some of those learnings and apply them.
I know they've done a lot of stuff in community colleges. Is this, that's one of the big pushes in the Carnegie Foundation is because community colleges are such a backbone of especially the U.S. economy that they're doing all this stuff to try to make education cheaper and better in community colleges. So that's pretty cool.
Right. Yeah. So some of this is a community, but overall there are sort of these basic principles that in basic pedagogical models that we are learning and trying to apply. In not just in courses that are offered to community colleges, but to all courses. But absolutely, the community colleges and sort of, for example, this major math problem.
The math.
But these are some of the problems that we are trying to address.
Okay, so I've got to talk to the adults who are running this. How much time do we have left?
You get about 15 minutes.
15 minutes. So do we have any interesting questions before we go on and talk about the startup? Because sometimes we'd like to. Oh,
we do. So, and you may be getting to this one. We have
let's go.
We have one from, and I apologize if I mispronounced his name. I believe it's Santau Rao, and the question is, what have been the biggest challenges in developing a business financial model for NovoEd?
So actually, the business model or the revenue model is something that we are working on with our partners. So one of the goals of NovoEd is to find universities and institutions who like to expand and sort of have a stronger presence online. And then our business model is to do some form of a revenue sharing with these partners and go online. So probably one of the major challenges is if you look at the university systems, they have a certain time and the certain way of doing things, and then in the startup world, you definitely want to be faster and more efficient, and synchronizing these two clocks is not always easy.
But do you have sort of a software licensing model? Would that be at least your initial business model, or what's it sort of look like?
No, but it's not a licensing model in a way that we don't actually charge universities upfront fee. We help them scale up, or we help them increase their retention, increase their their completion rate.
Okay.
And so we charge them after the result of our work is seen.
That's actually a great transition question because now we're going to move to entrepreneurship. Any other stuff, especially on entrepreneurship, or I can start asking Amin some general sort of entrepreneurship questions I was curious about. But if you've got another question, it's great. It's great hearing from folks who are actually watching instead of me just ranting at Amin.
It sounds to me that you may be asking or answering this question next. So the follow-up question that was, what has been your process for solving your business challenges? So I'm not sure if that's going to be part of it.
Yeah. Let's go on. Okay. So in this process, so it's sort of you and your student Bernaz, and you're kind of working with tech. But so how do you just sort of build the team and create the kind of social network so you can turn this sort of idea into a company? Since that's a big issue for a lot of entrepreneurs. They kind of got an idea. And you actually had a product, which surprised some of the local venture capitalists you talked to. Oh, he's got a product that works already?
Right.
So that was pretty good.
Yeah.
But so how'd you make that transition? So you got a company, people sit together?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how'd you get there?
Right. So I think I would say for your sort of future entrepreneurs, the most important step is committing yourself. So when you take the leave of absence, when you start on day one, Monday, you show up in the office, it's you and your co-founder, and you're committed, you're full time. Getting the third person is a lot easier. Then when you have, sort of a few other things going on, and, this may look like a project that you like a little bit, you may start, you may build on it, you may not. So I would say that the most important thing that I did that helps with the growth of the company was committing full time to it.
Okay, so you committed full time to it, which is, I mean, you got a teaching responsibility, so you take a leave.
Right.
Then when you start building out the team, who'd you look for? Like, what do you need to be successful in your space? Because that next step from 2 to sort of 7 or 8 is, in entrepreneurship, we tend to think of big companies, but that initial step, lots of evidence, 2 to 7 or 8, one of the most important steps.
Right. So we actually looked for talent, raw talent, in a sense that, we didn't look for skill sets to say, you need a, Ruby on Rails programming tomorrow because I need this part to be written. We tried to look for people who were, have very strong analytical abilities, who were hardworking, who were super smart, and then at the same time, I can't quote the name of your book, but sort of the people who are not jerks.
You're the no a-hole rule.
So we want to exactly. So we want to make sure that it's a group of people that they can work together. So we have this operating principle when we are designing the site, and that's about empowerment, right? So if you look at the site, in a sense, it says, education is not about, it's not a one-way channel for, sort of transferring content. You have to actually empower the learner. You have to, give them an identity, help them actually find what they are looking for. Sort of fosters skills like critical thinking, collaboration, and communication skills.
You're eating your own dog food.
Exactly. So we are trying to apply this to our own company as well.
I mean, just for folks on entrepreneurship, and this applies to innovation too, for company growth, there's kind of 2 basic philosophies, and you can even see this in very large companies. If you compare Apple to Google, for example, there's some companies from the very beginning, they want super specialists who are the absolute best thing in the world at this narrow thing. And then there are other companies that focus for sort of all-around players who can sort of grow their responsibilities with the company. So it sounds like you're going to the latter, the more Googly sort of model instead of the more Apple model.
Yeah, so our model is to hire very smart people and then try to get out of their way. Don't micromanage.
That works. Ryan's got a look on his face. Yes. Yeah. Bring it on.
So there's a couple of questions that are around funding, and if you could maybe just speak shortly to how you funded this venture.
Oh, sure. So with funding, actually, we have been lucky. So we have been luckier than most.
You went to like 1 million meetings. You were
right.
It's amazing how many people you met with.
Right.
It's not like somebody just came and gave him money. There was a lot of talk there.
Right. There was a lot of talk. Yeah. So for a certain period, I would talk to anybody who would talk to me. In a sense, for 2 or 3 weeks, I had quite a few meetings. So what we came up with, and I got an advice, was, sort of decide what you want, communicate this effectively, very clearly in the very first meeting, and, come up with a timeline. So that's what we did. I went around, talked to a few people, give them, this is what we are looking for, and asked them to send me, a heads up if they are interested. So fortunately, the interest we got into the company was 5 or 6 times more than what we actually were anticipating to raise. So we had to actually, change a few things, a few parameters, raise a little bit more money, involve more people. But the model was come up with a, sort of your pitch, talk to a lot of people, and be very clear about what you want.
Great. So any other questions besides the money part? I'd be curious about because I think we've talked about that enough. Other aspects of the team or running the organization?
So there were a few. We will have time for question and answers after. One of the things that I think are interesting is we have kind of what's maybe the number one lesson that you learn about becoming an entrepreneur, from being non-technical, well, you are technical, but going into being an entrepreneur. So that, I think that's an interesting question that we have. And the other one that I think is also very relevant is the one where it says somebody who wants to be an entrepreneur and also work a full-time job, as you were doing as a professor.
So the number one lesson I learned was that it's a lot of work. It's a serious thing. It's sort of, and this is among friends, sort of when you're an academic and you forget something, it's almost, sort of cute that, you're an absent-minded professor. It's not a big deal. But then when you're an entrepreneur, somebody has to get the paycheck at the, sort of, so you can't really forget things. You have to, sort of, there are...
David Kelly is a professor and also an entrepreneur. He says, at Stanford, I can do what I want, but in my company, these people have families to feed.
Right. It's a different, so it's sort of, 20, 30, 40 different kinds of responsibilities. And you can't really let, any of these balls fall. So you have to be on, sort of all the time.
That's interesting.
If you want to go ahead and continue.
Yeah, let's go on a little bit. So how much more time do we have before we go to?
About 5 minutes.
Okay. So let's sort of step back and do some of the big picture. So you kind of got it. So how many people are actually in your company?
So it's actually a small company, 8.
So that's not trivial.
Right.
8 people. You got
right.
You got to deal with personalities. A lot of evidence. The team size.
Right.
6, 7,
Mostly
8.
my team has to deal with my personality.
Yeah,
but
well, at least you're charming. It could be worse. So you've sort of reached about 8. But so where do you see the next few steps for your company? And then I want to talk about the crazy online ed space, since I know you have some ideas about that. But kind of give us, where do you think you folks are going for the next year? Like in terms of growth and scaling and brand and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I used I used to lose sleep over, what if nobody wants this? Now we have actually found a few partners who want to grow significantly using our technology.
Oh, good.
So now I'm losing a sleep over, how are we going to deliver? So we're going to have
from worried about demand to worried about dealing with the demand.
Yeah.
That's not so bad.
Yeah, that's not so bad. Yeah, that's a good problem to have. But what it means is that over the next year, we're going to actually scale up faster.
Okay.
And, in that sense, we have to, try to make sure that we continue to apply these lessons on, sort of how to scale up but maintain excellence in the company.
So you must you're spending a lot of time hiring. So I know you're down in the sort of Palo Alto, Menlo Park area, and you say
we moved to the city. Last week,
I knew it was.
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a new hip place to have a startup is in the city. So that's pretty.
So that's
by Twitter and everything. So okay. So I'm glad that things are progressing, and to me, going from worried about getting customers to having, so many you have to worry about how to handle them is an excellent sort of move.
It's a good problem.
It's a good problem. It's a good problem to have, and it's something that every startup needs. But let's sort of back up, because you've been, even though in the sort of MOOC online education space, you've been doing it for about 1.5 years or 2 years?
Right, 1.5 years, yeah, something like that.
So this means he's actually way ahead of the curve of most places. So what have you learned about what makes it effective and the way that things might and should go in the future? Because this is something every university, every company is worrying about this right now.
Right. So I think, if you look at the, sort of the first generation of solutions, MOOC solutions that came up with, and some of them are very popular. The popularity shows more the, sort of the symptoms of the
symptoms?
Yeah, they're not necessarily a solution to online education, to our, higher education. So what I'm expecting is that, given that there are more and more courses coming online, content becomes more and more commoditized, in a sense that, right now, if you want knowledge, if you just want answer to your question, there are a lot of places where you can go and, find the answer to your solution. Now, another part of the education is the intellectual stimulation, right? So actually, one of my colleagues used to say, education is what you take with you when you forget the actual material, right? So, sort of, I actually like to talk about 4 C's: critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication skills. These are if you go to college, these are the 4 skills that are called 21st century skills that you foster, that you sort of, our goal is that in this transition from brick and mortar to online learning, we don't lose these things. We actually find a way to use the social web to amplify it, to make sure that the students get that. And I think that's going to be the critical piece. That's going to be the part that sort of technology has.
So it is interesting because there's been this sort of movement, and I see this in my own classes. I see it in my kids' high school classes, where they start having the flip model, where they actually receive the information online, but the purpose of the class is to actually have social interaction.
Right.
So we're seeing that happen, but the perspective you're talking about is actually more subtle, which is that if you've got a class, in your case, thousands of people who never met each other and may not meet each other, still to make it an emotionally satisfying and social experience that gets. And to me, that's the great thing about your platform and your goal too.
Right, absolutely. So in fact, a lot of these massive open online courses have a very low completion rate, partly because it's just a boring experience to watch video after video and sort of interact with your computer. But if you're interacting with other people online, that's that's a different story. That creates a whole different experience. So these are the things that we are actually building on. In terms of trends, I think actually online education is going to grow. It's here to stay. It's going to, and partly because of the scale of the classes that we are offering, we learn things faster and we get better. So we get, every time we offer a course, every time we give a team assignment, we learn a little bit more about which team compositions are better. We learn a little bit more about, whether, this person, this particular student is going to show up even to this, team assignment. So this is where big data can actually help online education.
Let's talk about how big data can help online, because you hear this word big data all the time. How does it actually help online education?
Right. So, teaching used to be something that we do in a classroom behind closed doors. Right. One person would show up in front of the students, talk to them, they learn something, then they're gone. And then if some teachers do it better, some teachers do it worse. But there is really no way of measuring learning outcomes. There is no way of figuring out what works and what doesn't. And then the lessons are not exchanged between the instructors, between the faculty. This is not what we discuss in a faculty meeting. Right? But when you do this online and when you're actually measuring everything, you can actually get better. You can actually see what works and what doesn't work. And you can see this at a massive scale. So when you're offering a course and 80,000 people take it, you can actually, the signal is separated from the noise. You can actually find, you can see patterns. Yeah.
Very interesting.
You can do A/B testing. You can, observe students at a granular level and also at a scale. And, those findings, we try to transfer them back to the instructor or, find ways of
we've noticed that from working with your team, just for my classes this week, like I'm getting feedback, no, don't do that. That's not going to work. Try this, it'll work better. So I think it's kind of weird. So that's one of your roles is, besides helping people with the technology, is you kind of going into the advisory business because you want everybody who uses your platform to have the best possible classes.
Absolutely. So we try to transfer some of this back to the
service business there someday.
Yeah.
There could be something there. Yeah.
True.
Okay, great guys. So we had one question about how do you turn resistance or any type of hardship that you come into or any negative feedback into a positive and overcome those issues?
That's a good question.
That's a good question. We are in a very new space. So any comment, positive or negative, I see it as a learning opportunity. We really don't claim that we have answers to most of the questions. We are there to learn, and we are there to learn fast. So any feedback is good for us. I think actually then, the unfortunate event is when nobody cares enough to tell you something. When somebody cares enough about your product to come and tell you that this particular thing about it is wrong, you actually have to, thank your lucky stars that they actually, like it enough. They want to use it, and then they have difficulties. So negative feedback, it's actually a good thing. You want to hear it.
Yeah, that's excellent. So that's an interesting question also because in some ways, your argument is that the uncertainty in silence is much worse than negative feedback. The obstacles you can deal with, but when you get no feedback,
then you get then you get indifferent. Yeah,
that's really interesting. Because the whole entrepreneurship process, and frankly, since Amin has been a career academic, we get so much negative feedback on our work, we're just used to it.
Right, yeah.
I mean, if you do something good, nobody comments, that means that either they don't care or nothing's wrong with it, but we live for negative feedback, so academics are well suited to this. It's also, when you have Jeremy and Perry involved, they'll talk about the notion that essentially negative feedback, building things that don't work, that's the whole key to the entrepreneurship and creative process is failing forward, and you're always failing. The question is how quick are you learning?
And we have time for just one last question. We received variations, actually, of this question from a lot of the participants that were online. They were asking, what is the #1 piece of advice you would give for somebody that has an idea and wants to get started?
Take this course, take a technology entrepreneurship course. That's actually about, how you turn an idea, how to test it out, how to see whether there is a market for it, and then maybe you can, find a team and you can actually start working on it.
What about the #2 piece of advice? That was a commercial, but it was a good one. But, I mean, when you think, because you've been through this in the last year. I mean, you talked about commitment, but what about, just sort of like the personal advice and sort of inside the
personal idea, and sort of, and this is something I have learned from Chuck and others who teach this, is to test it out. Build a minimum viable product and try to test it with the users. So, there are a lot of interesting ideas out there. The question is who is going to actually refine it and who's going to actually face the people who are going to be the consumers and turn it into something that people actually want to use.
So this is really quite interesting. And maybe this is a good point to end, because this is, to me, the point where creativity meets entrepreneurship. And a little bit of big data, too, because creativity is sort of iteration, coming with all these crazy ideas. But where you can actually turn into a viable product is when you're moving forward at all times. And if you hear what Amin is talking about, they're using, people giving them specific feedback, but also by looking at the evidence from their big data. How many people are taking your class? Now, say that number again?
For 500,000.
500,000 people. So they can, in addition to the things people say, they can see their behaviors and learn what succeeds and what doesn't, and keep moving forward. So this notion that everything is a prototype and you're always sort of moving forward, that's one of the themes that runs throughout all entrepreneurship, all the courses we're teaching at Stanford, whether it be the certificate program or anything else. So maybe that's a good place to end. So you become a serious prototyper, but you use big data too, and I like that combination of those two. All right. So thank you so much for joining our webinar.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And it's always a pleasure to talk to Amin. It wasn't a very private conversation, but it was fun.
But it was fun. Yeah, absolutely.
So on behalf of the Stanford Center for Professional Development, I want to thank both of you. We really appreciated it, and it seems from the interaction, our audience did too. For those of you who are able to join us, again, we appreciate having you today. We will be sending out the link to the recorded webinar within a week. So if you missed any part or want to replay it, you'll have that opportunity.
He was looking for the right way to offer this course, and he had looked at a bunch of technologies, and none of them were exactly a good fit. So there are quite a few solutions out there that are good for what they call mastery learning. They deliver lectures, videos, multiple choice questions, programming assignments to the student until the student masters a particular
so that's
topic.
the concept. So I've done some where the camera's trained on you, and you're just talking.
Right.
And
it's just a one-way to Okay. So it's a one-way channel of,
Any background in programming or like?
Well, my
Did you code?
degree is computer science, and I
Oh, that's
used to
good.
code a
Okay.
long time ago.
Okay.
So I had to actually, sort of, learn a few things.
Okay.
But I thought it's a fun project, and I'm helping a very good colleague
Yeah,
of
we
ours
love Chuck.
who's,
Chuck Easley is a
yeah,
fabulous
and
guy.
very good, and his, heart was in the right place. He really, was trying to teach as many people as possible. So I thought I'll help him out, and hopefully in the process I learned something.
Right.
So, we put this thing together, and then 80,000 people signed up for this course. So this were, sort of, one of those, sort of interesting, people like sort of, there were people from serial entrepreneurs, very experienced entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley, all the way to, kids in their own project. They come give a presentation. They get feedback from their peers. They get feedback from mentors that I find for them. And that's the way the course works. And then I thought, well, maybe we should do that online. So I initially suggested that I commit a little bit time.
A little bit of time.
Yeah,
So
a little.
This was the beginning.
This was the beginning. Yeah, exactly. That's
Go in the water.
Yeah,
I put the total.
So actually, I and my student committed 8 days, 4 weekends to him, and said we will put something together for you to simulate this. But what happened was that.
But just a little time out. So even this, you're sort of you're doing programming. Like you're sort of switching to. Right.
Right. So actually, yeah. I haven't had
like a normal. Did you ever have?
You have the professor. You say, the professor knows the answers to all the, sort of questions you have, and we just, help you gain that knowledge.
So it's sort of sage in a little box.
Like that. Sage on the stage. Yeah. So, but entrepreneurship is not taught that way, right? There is no multiple choice question that would test whether you're an entrepreneur, or at least we haven't found it yet.
None that we know of.
Not that. So we thought, is there any way to do this online? And I asked him how he does that in his Stanford course. So he teaches this entrepreneurship course in Stanford, which is pretty popular. To an audience of probably less than 100, around 100 students every year. And he told me, well, there I get the students to come, form a team. Each team works in Accra, Ghana, who didn't have internet access at home or at school. They would have to walk to an internet cafe. They sent us pictures from this internet cafe in Ghana, where they would, sort of go there and, watch the lectures or submit their assignments. Very diverse group of people. We had the students from over 150 different countries in the world. In terms of, sort of distribution of, gender, it was actually almost an equal split between, male and female. Very interesting people, very energetic, very enthusiastic, who really, sort of wanted to do something.
So one question. So I've interviewed Amin and Chuck for our book on scaling. And one of the things I thought that was really interesting, when we emphasize this in the book, is